Just before we came on to record, we heard the news that Peter Mandelson, the American ambassador, has been sacked over details about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. So what took Starmer so long to get rid of him, do you think?
Good question. I assume that Peter Mandelson was saying to Starmer, look, as you know, Donald Trump has had his problems as well with Jeffrey Epstein, and he feels it very strongly. And I do feel, Keir, that if you got rid of me, Donald might regard that as a hostile act. I'd be very careful just before the visit to that. So I think that was probably the argument. I praise you. Obviously, I wasn't there at the time.
But it's like we've been in the room.
I think, all of us, when we saw the most recent email exchanges and that toe-curling, a paean of praise to Jeffrey Epstein after he had been done, and the suggestion that he should be fighting very hard for early release, all of that, I think we thought then it was completely over. I spoke to quite a lot of senior Labour Party people one way or another last night, and they all said he's finished, he's over, it's toast. So it took Keir Starmer overnight. That's not the fastest he's been. It is pretty brisk, I suppose, but it could have been done faster.
How much damage has been done, George? Because he did spend the day defending him. And we should remember that the appointment was made when we already knew of a friendship between Mandelson and Epstein.
Yes, I think a lot of people are asking why, when this was known, and Keir Starmer was asked about it at a press conference on opposition and gave a very sort of shifty, awkward response. This was obviously long before Mandelson's US appointment, but he was warned by figures from across the party about this. The Blue Labour, Peer Maurice Glassman, who's close to number 10, warned them at the time. He said he'd been at the inauguration. People kept coming up to him with pictures of Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein out shopping. There was a former Brown aide who said to me at the time, look, Peter Mandelson is a walking page 2 story. All of his friends, his history, his interests. This appointment gives the press a sort of excuse to delve into all of it relentlessly. Number 10's line now is that there were further details that weren't disclosed during the vetting process.
Yeah.
So that's the line they'll give. But it just adds to the sense of a government that's falling apart. This is obviously the second major resignation in less than a week, and is also a diplomatic headache because in terms of the job itself, Peter Mandelson had been a success. He'd got on with the White House. He'd wooed Donald Trump. The UK was getting preferable trade treatment, and now they're going to have a reset. They've also obviously moved David Lammy away from the foreign officer who had also built bridges into Trump world through his relationship with JD Vance. Although I understand as Deputy PM, he's going to keep a significant international role.
And how much damage could there be to the UK's relationship with a Trump-led White House? Andrew, I mean, you mentioned that Trump, of course, is implicated in the Epstein story as well.
In the end, I don't think this is going to change things very much in terms of a relationship because in the end, I may be wrong, I suspect they will pull Karen Pierce, the former ambassador, back out of her job on the Balkan desk in the Foreign Office and send her back to Washington again. It has been widely reported that Trump grumbles quite a lot about the lack of Karen Pierce in Washington. He really liked her. They got on very well. So if she comes back, actually, the relationship with Trump may be stronger, not weaker. There are, of course, all the other names in the frame. Who could also be sent to Washington. And I hear that Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, is likely to be sent.
That would be the perfect way of getting him out of the way.
That was a joke. But it was reported that George Osborne is another possible Starmer pick right at the beginning, which astounds me.
Well, George Osborne was involved in arranging the JD Vance visit to the Cotswolds, wasn't he? So he's clearly making some relationships there.
Yeah, I mean, rather like Mandelson, actually. He's someone who loves the game of politics, a sort of relentless networker. And number 10 weren't wrong to think that someone with those attributes perhaps would be able to channel the White House. The problem is that Peter Mandelson just brings so much baggage, and in the case of Epstein, really sort of darkness with him.
Yeah, and I mean, we're just at the beginning of the new term. Angela Rayner has had to stand down over a scandal. Peter Mandelson has now been sacked over a scandal. Are there questions about the government's wisdom in its appointments and its vetting processes for its high-profile figures?
Yes, I mean, the word Kemi Badenoch used repeatedly in the Commons yesterday was judgment, and that was probably her strongest performance against Keir Starmer. You could see she'd learned the lessons from the stumbling performance she had over Angela Rayner the previous week. And this is a word that Labour critics and MPs are using too. It all ultimately goes back to the principle. And there's unfortunately now a pattern of a lack of due diligence. You've seen a string of ministers have to go, Louise Haigh, Tulip Sadiq, Rushana Ali. You've obviously had lots of departures from number 10, Sue Gray. And this is a government that's only just over a year old. You've now had the Deputy Prime Minister go as well. Unfortunately for Keir Starmer, more and more people are going to say, is there a problem with you? This is a pattern now. Why has a government with such a big majority, with so much time to prepare, they could see from a mile away that they were going to win the election, why has it been so dysfunctional?
I think there are two things behind all of this, both ultimately, I guess, Keir Starmer's fault. The first is the relentless, perhaps unavoidable focus on Tory sleaze and Tory failure before the election, and the promise we are going to be completely different. We are going to be absolutely squeaky clean. It's not going to be like the old corrupt politicians you remember. Well, George has just listed some of the problems with that. And a second, I think, an instinct when looking around, and again, I understand this, to reach back from figures from the past, particularly from the Blair years, because Labour was out of office for a very long time and kind of lost the understanding of how the state works and lost the experience, and therefore bringing in some of these people. And Jonathan Powell has been the most successful, I would have thought, of all of them, has been a great temptation. But the problem is, anybody who has been around for a long time has some kind of history. There is some kind of problem there. And I would have thought, if you look at it, Peter Mandelson's trajectory, you'd think this has happened twice before. Are we absolutely sure that it's not going to happen again? That was a failure of due diligence. I should say, by the way, it is a tragedy for Peter Mandelson himself. I saw him speak at the Ditchley Park conference on Saturday when he was giving his speech trying to explain Britain's relationship with the Trump administration and what he thought about it. And, it was a very, very powerful performance. And he even joked about his durability as a politician and laughed about that right at the beginning. But, he loved this job. He adored it. He had his partner in the very, very wonderful, lavish US ambassador's residence in Washington, and his dog was there, and it was all going fantastically wrong. So for him, this is a complete personal disaster.